Hey guys, so I wanted to go ahead and quickly, not necessarily quickly, but go and respond to a video that I saw yesterday that I thought actually was very good. I think that they said a lot of great things that I'll echo here, but there were some things that I didn't agree with, and I kind of felt that it was more of like that there was nuance missing rather than that it was just blatantly incorrect or wrong. And so the video was on posture, and to kind of begin, when we talk about posture, we think about the way that we stand and the way that we sit. And when we think about it in those terms, we think of posture as being somewhat of a static thing. However, if you think about people evolutionarily speaking, like we don't tend to historically sit or stand, especially when we think about our Neanderthal times, right? We tend to be active and moving, and that's kind of what any organism's main function is to be able to move around and function. And one of the things that I did like about the video was that it was talking about, when we talk about our posture, sitting at a desk all day, if we have a desk job, that we're not moving a whole lot. And so one of the things that they suggested is actually, getting up from your desk once an hour, moving around, shifting in your seat at the very least. One of the things that happens when we move around is that we stimulate what are called our synovial sacs, which are sacs that are in our joint capsules, particularly in our spine as well, that when we don't move around, they tend to, the joint tends to dry out, and then you don't have as much lubrication in that joint. So getting up and moving around at least once an hour is actually going to be beneficial for you, not just from a I'm getting my steps in standpoint, but also from a strain standpoint. One thing that I definitely noticed, and it's one of the things that we talk about a lot as trainers, is like never put a wallet in your back pocket and then sit on it. Right? It's okay if you're walking around and you're keeping your wallet in your back pocket, but that's also how wallets get stolen. But when you're sitting on it, it elevates your pelvis so that you're constantly sitting at a shift, and then you're going to be compressing this side of your spine while if the wallet is on this side, right? And then we're lengthening this side of the spine. So we start developing a little bit of a curve there, we put more stress on one side, and then we're also shifting out, so those pads have more of an opportunity to shift out and then hit nerves and all that. And so it can also like create muscle imbalances between either side of your quadratus lumborum, which is the muscle that attaches here on your iliac crest of your pelvis and comes up at a diagonal and attaches into your spine. And it's responsible for some of our lateral shifting. But it's kind of like is one of those bigger muscles that actually helps support the spine, and especially in that lower range, along with your multifidus and like retrospinatus, which can also be affected by an asymmetrical shift. So actually shifting from your weight being on one cheek to the other cheek, not keeping a wallet in your back pocket, those are things that are going to help benefit your spine in the long run. But so yeah, getting up and moving so that we're lubricating those joints, that we're shifting our seats so that we can actually have some benefit in that lower back. But one thing that they did not talk about, but Dr. Mike recently did actually, that I saw a video of, where they were talking about the big inflatable Swiss balls and people using those to sit at their desks. One of the point that he made that is actually, I think, really good is that we are sitting, we are more, especially if you are in an office all day and you're used to sitting in a chair, you're going to have some level of muscle atrophy. And those muscles, one of the reasons why we feel sore in our back when we've been sitting all day is that those muscles have been working to support us all day. And then you put yourself on a physio ball that's going to challenge your stability all day, that's going to further fatigue those muscles. And when we were talking about posture, right, especially like they were talking about how studies are starting to show that tech neck or text neck, where we're down here like this, doesn't necessarily correlate with neck pain. Well, if you've ever had text neck pain, you know that it is a thing. But one of the solutions that we've been trying to do, and a lot of physical therapists do, will just be to kind of tuck your chin back. But what's happening here is not necessarily localized, right? A lot of times when we have this posture, it's not just happening here in our neck, right? It's happening here. And this was kind of where I started to digress and move away and not agree with everything that they were saying in the video, because they were saying, you can't continue to do corrective exercise to try to fix these problems. You can't keep stretching and just doing that to try to fix these problems. And I can speak for myself that, and again, this is very low on the hierarchy of evidence, but that when I've gone and I've seen my chiropractor or I've seen any type of physiotherapist for these types of issues, even when I've worked with clients, I have seen improvements, especially in pain and posture, when it comes to doing especially more stretching and activation type drills. So that's where I kind of deviate a little bit from that. But the thing is that, and this is going back a little bit more to what Greg Hooks says in his writings, whether it's the Athletic Body Imbalance or his FMS, Functional Movement Systems book, where when we are looking at especially things like posture, you can only say, stand up straight, pull back for so long, before eventually you're just going to go back into your whatever your habit is. And that's not quite what he says. What he says is, like, if you have, let's say you had an injury like I have, and then your movement patterns are going to change because of that injury. Maybe there was a compensation, maybe you developed a limp, and then over time the injury goes away, but the limp remains even after the injury is gone. Why does it remain? Well, it could be a muscle tightness issue, right, where certain muscles are more active now than they used to be. Maybe they're tighter, maybe they've been sitting in a shortened position for a longer period of time. And then we go through and we stretch and we lengthen all those muscles that have become tight, and then the limp continues. Right? And that's the fallacy, because when we have motor patterns that develop over time, it's not simply that necessarily that there is a tightness that is causing it. It could be. That can absolutely, like having mobility issues, having a tight muscle can absolutely cause movement distortions. But we also have learned behavior, right? What our brain is telling our body to do gets turned into muscle memory, and our muscles and our brain remember that, and it's recruiting muscles based on those patterns that have been developed over time. And so even though the injury is gone, the movement pattern may remain because we are now taught to do that, right? So what we need to be doing is we actually need to do a combination of all these things. We need to be strengthening weakened muscles, we need to be loosening tight muscles, we need to be, and oftentimes the tight muscles are also weak muscles. So you may have to actually, add mobility to that muscle, add mobility to the joint, and then also strengthen those muscles that were tight, because the reason that they're tight is because they're weak and they're overworking. And I know that this is like kind of cumbersome and overwhelming, daunting to think about, especially if you're thinking about it on a global sense, especially when you're trying to think, okay, well then how do we address these problems? Well, first of all, yes, they have devices that you can stick to your spine that can feel when you start to slouch, and then it will vibrate on you and pull up. But the thing is that there's a reason why you're slouching. Right? If you're sitting at your computer and you're reaching forward for a mouse, or you're reaching forward for the keyboard, then we're holding ourselves in this posture, right? If we're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or we're wrestling, we get into this posture. This is actually part of the game. And so, one of the points that they were trying to get at in the video is that we kind of need to accept that these postures are going to happen. We are not static beings. We don't walk around, like this all day. We actually have to move. We have to twist. The reason why our scapula can come apart is that they're designed to do that, right? This protraction is a natural thing that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be able to bend forward. We're supposed to be able to round. We're supposed to be able to control our pelvic tilt. This is part of our design. But it can become problematic over time. So what is the solution here? Well, honestly, doing a lot of external rotations and movements like this, like face pulls and W flies, which are very, very similar movements, high rows. I have people do a high row with a cable machine. It's one of my most common exercises that I prescribe, where we hold back in the high row position and then we extend forward and extend forward. So we're using a cable machine that's in front of us, usually actually set pretty narrow. So a lot of times the arms are out like this, right, for the machine. And so I have to actually walk pretty far back. But you can have it a little bit wider and then cross them so that you have it's trying to pull you to this position and you have to fight it. So this is a great one for back activation. If I'm belly down, we can do ATY. So in this position, I'm going to turn, and I really want to focus on actually this motion, right? What's happening in my lower arms? Great. But we can also kind of move our arms back and forth without moving our scapula. So I'll get into a protractor position. You can see, yes, I can do the arm movement, but what really matters is moving those wings, right? Getting those rhomboids and those back muscles, lower trapezius down. From here, I'm going to go pinky up, and I want to be thinking about going through this. And you guys can do this, like you don't even have to get into a prone position to do this. It's better if you do so that you actually have weight that you're resisting against. But from an activation standpoint, you can tighten up your back posture just by standing here and doing this, right? You know, different positions here, right? To just kind of get that fired up. Putting more weight on it is going to fatigue those muscles. So, you know, if you're trying to get better posture throughout the day, you know, doing these activation drills, you know, is just going to fatigue those muscles even more, and then you're more likely to fall into this position more. But we are strengthening them. We're waking them up. We're telling them that's what we want us to do. The other way that we can kind of, and I've seen this as well, that's a really, really great idea, actually, is that one guy had said to put bands on your shoulders that pull you in this kyphotic posture, and then when you go running, you try to hold yourself into an upright posture. So rather than using a brace that holds you back in good posture, we use one that pulls us, a band that pulls us into bad posture, and then we fight against it so that we can get the proper activation going there, which I actually do like that a lot. I'm not a fan of wearing harnesses on your back to hold you in this upright position, because what will happen is that the muscles that are supposed to be working are going to atrophy. Is there a time and place for it? Maybe very little. One of the things that I actually found accidentally through doing bondage actually was I was tied to a chair, actually my workout bench, and I had the rope came up here and went over my shoulders, and I was there for like an hour or two while people were fucking with me, and so it was pulling me and I was fighting against it, so it's really, really stretching this front chain. And that's kind of the other side of it, especially when we're talking about upper posture, is that these muscles get tight over time. So the argument for saying, okay, I'm going to wear a back brace for a very short amount of time, let's say an hour, right, that pulls me into this posture, well, is it going to benefit me? A little bit, right? It's going to benefit you in the sense that we are elongating these muscles, right? And it's holding us in this posture, and we're just giving our back a break, but that doesn't mean that we should wear it all the time. And that's where people get into trouble, is that they are like, okay, I've got an 8-hour day at work, I'm going to wear this back brace so it's going to hold me up here. Well, you're going to atrophy your muscles. But, you know, if it was just an hour for a day, just to kind of not to give your back a break, but more to elongate these muscles and hold you in that stretched position so that your chest knows that it can relax into that position, then we're going to see some benefit for that. As far as like using lacrosse balls and foam rollers and all that, you know, the studies have shown that the effects of that's going to last about 20 minutes, right? So if you're going into something where you have an exercise that is problematic, like I've got somebody I'm working with right now that I'm doing the high row exercise, and we're getting a little bit of this bicep tendon that comes up into the shoulder. This could be for the long head, so which is going to be your medial bicep, but it kind of comes up through here and runs near your anterior deltoid, which makes it, we're doing it over Zoom, so it's actually really, really hard to tell. But in this area is where he's feeling that little twinge. And so we're having him use a lacrosse ball like here in the pec minor, right, because that might be pulling us into this kyphotic posture. Remember, the pec minor attaches into the ribs, comes up to the little nubbin here, that's a part of your scapula, and it kind of anchors your scapula down and pulls you in this rounded shoulder position. So by loosening that up, it helps us get to a more anatomical position. Also doing my trapezius and levator scap, because those can cause this to rise a little bit, which can affect how the glenohumeral joint moves, which can put more of a tendency for that popping to happen on the biceps tendon. Also, if we're being pulled into internal rotation and we're trying to fight into the external rotation, that can potentially cause it. So working on the teres major and the infraspinatus right back here, that can help with that popping. So, but again, the time that we're going to see as far as like using the lacrosse ball, using a Theracane, using foam rollers is about 20 minutes. So I would probably do that like right before that specific exercise, so that when I'm doing that exercise, I'm not putting extra strain on that tendon. Granted, tendon snapping over a joint usually is, unless it's like really, really painful, is usually not particularly harmful to that tendon. Those tendons can actually take quite a bit, but we do want to resolve it over time, because we get 20 years of that is eventually going to take its toll. It's just not going to really hurt us in the short run. So yes, we can see that the body can change when it comes to doing posture correction, either through teaching it, either by loosening, either by strengthening, but really it's going to be a combination of all those things. And the last thing that I'll throw out there, and it's probably one of my favorite things for this, is called active release technique. And unfortunately, it's not something that you can really do to yourself. You do have to have a specialist do it. But every time that I've had a jiu-jitsu related injury, usually in my rotor cuff, they will actually find adhesions, usually in this posterior shoulder capsule here, and they'll be able to release those, and usually the pain will go away. So oftentimes there will be like micro tears or little micro traumas that can happen in there. That tightness can actually change the way the biomechanics of that joint. So if you're having restricted movement, that is one of the best therapies that I have found for addressing that. There are strengthening things that your therapist can show you how to do. The person that I go to is my chiropractor, but a massage therapist sometimes will know how to do active release technique. Sometimes it will be a physiotherapist or a physical therapist, either or. So whoever you're working with, if it's somebody that actually has that particular certification, you can go to the Active Release Technique website, and they'll actually have a directory of your local therapists. And that's, if you're having a joint issue, that's what I would recommend doing if it is just a muscle tendon soft tissue injury, rather than something more in-depth that might require some other treatment. But I digress a little bit. So, yeah. Posture. It's going to be about changing movement patterns. It's going to be about how much we can actually change in the long run. Again, we are dynamic beasts, right? There are going to be tensions pulling on our joints. The balance is going to change. If you get injured, you're going to have altered proprioception. That's going to be an altered awareness of the way that your body is moving. So, and this is one of the reasons why I actually ended up firing my personal trainer, because he was not particularly attentive. So I know that, because of my knee injury, when I go down into a squat, I might have an altered movement pattern, and he just wasn't really watching. He just was like, oh, you were a personal trainer, so you know what you're doing. No, you're going to have altered proprioception, altered awareness of what your body is doing when you have an injury, and sometimes you don't even know if you have an injury, right? You don't know if a muscle is tight. If I'm coming down into a squat and my knees are buckling inward, well, what's causing that? Is it happening at the foot? Is it happening at the hips? Is it tight adductors? Is it underactive abductors? What is it? Again, it's one of those things that you have to kind of go through the steps and actually eliminate what's going on or what's not going on, and figure out what's left over. So that's what I got for you guys as far as like posture and posture correction goes. They did make the point that slouching is not actually the end of the world, especially if your back's getting tired. If you're sitting for a long period of time, that's a cue to actually get up and move around. And holding an upright seated posture is tiring on your body. So be mindful and actually listen to what your body's telling you, because fatigue is a real thing, and there isn't a such thing as necessarily perfect posture or bad posture. Do you look better if you have upright posture and you look confident? Absolutely. But, biomechanically, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have an injury. It depends on, if you can maintain good posture while you are lifting something heavy or something like that. Is what you're doing necessarily putting you in a compromised position? If there's not a lot of load, probably not. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. I hope I haven't mucked it up. If I've created more questions than there are answers, ask them, put them in the comments below, and I'll get back to it as soon as I can.